Coming up on Tech News Weekly, it's just me today, Jason Howell. We talk about Tesla getting cozy with Bitcoin, the U.S. Army getting cozy with Hololens to the tune of 120,000 of them. Super Mario is dead, sort of. Don't worry, don't panic. Should you see Godzilla versus Kong? Apparently you shouldn't, so should I. What's in this whole NFT thing for artists? And a review of the Nest Hub 2 with sleep tracking. So many things to talk about today on Tech News Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 177, recorded Thursday, April 1st, 2021. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Command Line Heroes, a podcast that tells the epic true tales of developers, programmers, hackers, geeks, and open source rebels who are revolutionizing the technology landscape. Search for Command Line Heroes anywhere you listen to podcasts. And by the Enterprise Tech 30. The Enterprise Tech 30 is a definitive list of the 30 most promising B2B startups as determined by over 100 venture capitalists and 20 corporate development teams. Visit enterprisetech30.com to see 2021's winners. Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly. This is the show where every week we talk to people who are making and breaking the tech news. I'm Jason Howell, and I say we because normally it's me and my co-host Micah Sargent. Micah is out today, so it's me in my lonesome, but not really, because if you follow the show, which you obviously do, you're watching and listening, you know that we usually bring on a whole lineup of awesome people to talk to. So I'm not going to be very lonely today. I've got 4 amazing interviews, starting with this one, Elon Musk and cryptocurrency. Pretty easy to find some serious overlap between those two things, especially the people who are fans of Tesla, to some degree end up being fans of cryptocurrency, at least the real enthusiasts anyways. Elon just made it a whole lot easier to connect the dots between those two things. And Sam Abuelsamid from the Wheel Bearings podcast is here to talk about Tesla's bet on Bitcoin. Welcome back to the show, Sam.
Hey, Jason, always great to be back.
Yeah, it's always great to have you on. Thank you for hopping on. And, it's a Tesla story, so I figured you'd probably be all about this. Although it also goes into that cryptocurrency world, which on today's show, by the way, we have 2 stories that are related to crypto. So I don't know, maybe it's on my mind, but I'm very interested in what Tesla has to gain from a deal like this. So let's start with what Elon Musk announced initially. What is it that he's announced as far as Bitcoin being payment for Tesla? What does that entail?
Well, actually, if you go back a little further, about a month and a half, Tesla announced that they had actually put a bunch of their cash reserves into Bitcoin. They had purchased $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin and put some of that money there. And then a few weeks ago, Elon started hinting at that you'd soon be able to buy a Tesla with Bitcoin, and as of last week, they officially turned on that functionality on the Tesla.com website. When you order a vehicle, you now have the option when you get to the payment page, you can either pay with a card when you place your order or pay with Bitcoin.
So cool. You can do this now. The deal from last month, the $1.5 billion investment in Bitcoin. How is that related to this? Did they need, I'm trying to understand the financial aspects of this. Are they intrinsically related? Tesla needed to do one in order to offer the other, or are they 2 separate plays?
No, they're really 2 separate plays. I mean, every big company's got some amount of cash reserves, and that they use to cover their operating expenses from month to month, as they have cycles in their revenue. And Tesla had about 12 billion in cash reserves, and they took. Most companies usually will put that money in fairly liquid things. They'll put it into some put some of it into money market accounts, or some other things where they have ready access to it, because they use that to cover their expenses from month to month. Tesla decided to take a chunk of that money and put it into Bitcoin. and that's completely, well, it's more or less separate from what they're doing now with accepting payments in Bitcoin. One connection there is they have said that if they take a payment in Bitcoin from a customer, that's just going to go into their Bitcoin wallet, basically. And they're not going to be converting that back to dollars in the near term. And I think part of the reason why they're doing that also has to do with the reason why you might want to think twice before you actually decide to use Bitcoin to buy a Tesla vehicle. And that's because every time you make a transaction with Bitcoin, you're technically liable for capital gains taxes, which is one of the big challenges, because the IRS does not consider Bitcoin to be a currency. They consider it to be property. It's an investment vehicle, like owning stocks or bonds. When you buy a stock at a certain price, and then if you sell it later at a higher price, that difference, you're liable for capital gains taxes on that. The same thing is true with Bitcoin. So Tesla is buying the Bitcoin and taking Bitcoin in payments right now on the assumption that value of the Bitcoin is going to keep going up and up and up, and it'll be worth more to them later. But they're not immediately converting that to dollars, because then they would have to pay taxes on it right away.
Interesting. Okay. And then, I mean, not only that, but Bitcoin pricing, as we've seen, I mean, it's all over the map. It's a pretty volatile. I mean, I was going to say it's stabilized somewhat, which I guess is kind of true, but in the grand scheme of things, who the heck knows? How does that volatility, that price volatility, come into play for a deal like this? Like, I can imagine, like, what I'm reminded of is like years ago, people having a couple of Bitcoin in their wallet and they used it to buy pizza, and then in hindsight they realized that was like thousands of dollars worth of a single slice of pizza or whatever. How does that come into play when you're thinking about using your Bitcoin to purchase a Tesla? Same, just larger scale?
Pretty much, yeah. And this is the problem anytime you have volatility with any kind of currency, the value of a currency. We haven't really seen too much of it with dollars here in the U.S. for a while, but in the past we've had times, I'm sure you remember, there's been countries where they've had economic challenges and they've gone through periods of hyperinflation. Well, that's basically what's happening with Bitcoin. Is we're having hyperinflation with Bitcoin. And so, using that Bitcoin to buy anything right now is problematic, because you never really know how much you're actually paying for something. No. Whereas, most currencies tend to be relatively stable. They go up and down, but they don't bounce around anything like Bitcoin does.
Yeah, and I mean, when you're talking about that pricing and the volatility there, everything baked into that reminds me of just kind of like a general question of risk, and not only just the risk, but the costs to insure against that risk. If Tesla as a company is getting into accepting Bitcoin, like, is there an insurance that that covers the wild volatility that is contained therein? Or are we too early in this game to be there yet?
No, there's no insurance for anything like this. And this is where, when either, big investment firms or big companies are making investments in things like this, they will usually hedge their bets. This is where hedge funds come in. They'll buy other investments, that offset that and try to minimize the risk. But for some, just for a straight up buy of Bitcoin, there is no insurance for that. If it suddenly goes to $20,000 tomorrow, I think today it's somewhere around $57,000. If it goes to $20,000 tomorrow or next week, all of a sudden half of that money you had is gone, or more than half of it is gone. And conversely, if it goes up, if you buy a Tesla today for over $50,000 worth of Bitcoin, and next month Bitcoin is worth $100,000, you've effectively paid twice as much for that car. The value has changed. Has gone down by half in terms of Bitcoin. So it's always really risky to play around in things like this.
Yeah, no kidding. Which makes me wonder, like, what is the upside of someone doing this? I suppose the idea might be that there's a lot of crypto millionaires out there with millionaires based on the money that, the amount that they see when they log into their digital wallet, having not transferred it out. this just gives them an avenue to spend that money, I suppose. Kind of similar to
it's like NFTs. You know?
I was just going to say,
everybody's
just like
buying
NFTs.
Everybody's buying these NFTs because they've got all this crypto and they don't know what to do with it, and so they're spending it on stuff that they hope maybe might go up in value, so that next month or next year, they can cash out. To me, it comes across as a gimmick. I mean, there's actually two parts. Going back to the two parts of this for Tesla, the Tesla putting some of their cash reserves in Bitcoin. If they think the value of Bitcoin is going to go up, that actually, there's some economic sense in there, because it helps them boost their cash reserves, money that they've got sitting there. But for customers, I have a hard time seeing much upside in doing this unless you just, you feel like you've got too much Bitcoin and you've got to do something with it.
Yeah, exactly. Got to play the game somehow, put it somewhere, turn it from numbers in an app in your Coinbase wallet into something tangible like a car. And that's one way to do it.
And speaking of the wallet, Tesla's got an FAQ on their website that goes through a whole bunch of things that you have to be wary of. And they talk in there about, make sure that you don't put in the wrong numbers for your wallet, or the Tesla wallet where it's going to go to. And also you have to do all this, fairly quickly, because when you hit that Bitcoin pay with Bitcoin button, they price everything in dollars, in US dollars. And then it gives you a conversion rate, tells us this is how many Bitcoin this is going to cost you. And it times out. They don't say what the time is. I'm guessing it's probably somewhere around, maybe 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes, because Bitcoin is so volatile. It says if it times out, you're going to have to start the whole transaction again from the beginning. And if you mess up and put in the wrong wallet number,
oh my goodness,
then you could lose that money. The Bitcoin transactions are not reversible. All of these warnings.
Yeah, a lot of warnings there to heed when we're dealing with this crypto stuff that can already kind of be confusing, especially for people who are new to it. So important to look into that. Sam, really appreciate you taking the time to hop on with me today. Sam Abuelsamid does the Wheel Bearings podcast, of course, also happens to be the principal analyst with Guidehouse Insights. If people want to follow you online, where can they find you?
You can find me at guidehouseinsights.com. You can find me on Twitter. You can go to wheelbearings.media, click on the contact link there. I'm all over the place.
Right on. Thank you for being all over this place today. Appreciate it, Sam.
Always a pleasure to talk, Jason.
We'll talk to you soon. All right. Up next, apparently it just worked out this way. It's the Battle of the Sams. We've got Sam Machkovech from Ars Technica coming on to do a little bit of a roundup of some gaming tech. Some interesting stories there bubbling up right now. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Command Line Heroes. Command Line Heroes, well, it's a podcast. You're already familiar with podcasts. You listen to one all the time. This one, and namely, I don't know about your other listening habits, but Command Line Heroes, add it to your roster. It shares with you the epic true tales of developers, of programmers, hackers, geeks, open source rebels who have, and by the way, still are, revolutionized the technology landscape. And actually right now, season 7 is out. Season 7 of Command Line Heroes explores a pretty a memorable year for me. 1995, it was the start of the dot-com boom. A lot of things really had to come together for the internet to succeed at that time. So you get a whole bunch of episodes in this season dedicated to the developments happening there. Long before you could hop on GoDaddy just to grab a quick domain name, there was a woman you'd have to call, Elizabeth Jake Feindler. She was the keeper of all domains. And actually episode 1, which is out now, it's fantastic. You got to listen to it. Features a conversation with her, now in her 90s, about how she managed the internet, how her team needed to create the DNS. Lots of stuff to dive into there. 1995 was really the year that ISPs became just a dominant gateway to all of the information superhighway, a term we don't use much anymore. But how did we go from ARPANET all the way to that? Well, it turns out none of it would have happened without a team of awesome engineers at the University of Michigan and a network that they built called the NSF Net. There's just a whole bunch of episodes. This was just episode 1, 1995. It's a pivot point. It's a moment when the internet really kind of went from an academic thing, a curiosity, to what it is now. It all started then, a global phenomenon. Command Line Heroes is hosted by developer and podcaster Saran Yabarak. And like I said, I listened to episode 1. I just love this season is focusing entirely on 1995. I remember it pretty clearly, just kind of the feeling of being on the precipice of this kind of major shift in computing. I was a nerd about this stuff, so it was really interesting to learn more about Elizabeth Jake Feinler in episode 1. You should check it out for yourself. You will enjoy it thoroughly. Check out all of the incredible stories from season 7. Do that today. Search for Command Line Heroes anywhere you listen to podcasts. That's Command Line Heroes. You can download it today. And our huge thanks to Command Line Heroes for their support of this show and the Twit Network. All right, so we've got just a few, like a roundup of gaming-ish related stories. And usually when we have that, I like to invite my friend Sam Machkovech from Ars Technica on the show. Welcome back to the show, Sam.
I'm happy to be here, finally technically set up and ready to talk about, I think we've got some games and maybe at least one movie kind of thing to talk about. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with the Pentagon and the U.S. Army, which, I mean, I guess it's kind of gamey because it's but HoloLens was never a gaming platform. There's no game here, I suppose. But basically, the U.S. Army is going to be outfitted with more than 120,000 HoloLens devices. That's a whole lot of HoloLens. That might have to be the title.
I was going to say, that's kind of war games is where I would go with that. Because this is a deal that will put, for people who don't know, HoloLens is Microsoft's augmented reality headset platform. They've been cooking it up for years. It's now in its second model. And when it first got announced, there was a lot of talk about it could be used for all kinds of things, maybe some games, maybe getting instructions on plumbing. But they always seem to be teasing at enterprise as the bigger deal. HoloLens 2 was focused squarely on enterprise. No gaming demos or gaming tests shown off. Originally, it was like Minecraft and a couple of other cute things, but it's just enterprise. And this is about as enterprise as it gets when it comes to $21.9 billion in the deal between Microsoft and the U.S. Army. And this will put 120,000 headsets. It sounds like it's up to 120,000. And if you cost that out, that's approximately $180,000 per headset, give or take, which for a defense contract is actually remarkably cheap. But says a lot about kind of U.S. government spending on military. But be that as it may, if you look, if you're watching the video version of this, you'll see a shot of the headset, which kind of looks like a Kinect, the old Xbox sensor that was competing with the Wii. It's got multiple out-facing sensors. It also has some that face inside. Now, this headset, which has the acronym that I'm blanking on, but it sounds very military, the IVAS, I-V-A-S. That is, which stands for, oh goodness, I'm blanking on it. I'm sure it's a good acronym. The Integrated Visual Augmentation System. So what that means is it's projecting certain images for a soldier either in combat or in training. It could highlight targets. It could add heat and night vision. But it's also got sensors that are facing inward that are checking for heart rate, that are checking for possible concussion symptoms. And it's got a strap to a helmet. There had actually been a deal that was inked in 2018 for less than $500 million. So the deal for this specific HoloLens stuff has grown, and it seems to be adding more stuff, and it seems to require a helmet. Originally, I think they wanted to have something that would be a little more malleable to use cases, not requiring a heavy-duty helmet. But I'm assuming Microsoft looked at everything saying, yeah, you're going to have this amount of weight strapped to something a little sturdy if you're going to be out doing stuff with all of these sensors attached. So it's a pretty intense growth, one, because there's a report from the U.S. Army itself saying that this will be used for training, that they're using a mix of machine learning and augmented reality to have what I assume will be randomized kind of fake military encounters with this HoloLens-like headset on. So this is as close as HoloLens has ever gotten to Call of Duty, in other words.
Wow, yeah. Like I look at that photo that we were just showing, and I'm just reminded of Universal Soldier. It's like suddenly here we are, these head units. We're in the future. Now, one question I have about this, I'm not sure if you've heard about any blowback on Microsoft for cutting a deal with the Army. I mean, this wouldn't be the first time that big tech has made a deal with the military, let's say. But I feel like that hasn't worked out so well in the court of public opinion for other companies that have done this. Google, Apple, in some cases, they've reversed kind of direction when, people started freaking out about it. Has there been any of that reaction here?
So with Microsoft, the initial deal in 2018 got a ton of internal blowback, so much so that a multi-page open letter was signed by a ton of Microsoft staffers saying that they wanted HoloLens to be used for good, not war. That was the catchphrase of the entire lengthy letter, talking about just simply not wanting to build something that was specifically designed for combat. Now, they can sell Microsoft Excel to the military, and if they want to use that as a spreadsheet to do some sort of damage or battling, that's up to the military. But HoloLens having so much specific stuff, kind of like heat sensors and night sensors and other combat-specific things, for them was beyond the pale. And Satya Nadella, the CEO over at Microsoft, responded pretty quickly to that one, making clear that he believed Microsoft should not withhold technology from democratic governments who protect the freedoms we enjoy, was the phrase he used. So he made that call. It doesn't sound like there was some conversation about people being reallocated to other teams if they wanted on an ethical level to not be a part of certain stuff. But just on the larger scale for Microsoft, it sounds like they're moving full steam ahead in spite of those specific complaints being made internally.
Yeah. All right. Well, you've got a few other stories here that we can talk about. The death of video games, or at least a certain segment of video games. What's happening that Sony announced, and should we be worried if we still have in a box somewhere a PlayStation 3?
Well, the April Fool's joke for today is that Super Mario is dead, because Nintendo released a few Mario-related things last year to celebrate the 35th anniversary of Super Mario coming out in Japan. And part of that was that games that were released, specifically Super Mario 3D All-Stars and Super Mario 35, would no longer be available. Now, in these cases, those are digital downloads, and Nintendo simply chose, we're just not going to sell them online. And then for Mario 3D All-Stars, there's a physical copy that's no longer being printed. Now, in the latter case, companies stop printing games all the time. That's not new. But the idea of saying, oh, you could buy this digitally, but we're just going to turn that off from our servers and leave all the other games live is very strange. And the interesting thing was choosing March 31st as the cutoff date, which some outlets have wisely pointed to as the final day of a fiscal quarter for a company publicly traded in Japan like Nintendo. So the idea being that this was a cash grab sort of way to get people to pump that money. There was a report from Vice by Patrick Klepek, who found a source who said people put games on their wish lists without buying them. So someone might be interested in Mario 3D All-Stars and go, oh, I might buy it later. And Nintendo wanted to force the issue and say, you should buy it now or never. So whether that really worked out for them, we'll find out. But in the case of what you mentioned was Sony, Sony's got a kind of different thing going on. They've got older platforms whose databases, we believe, are the same as the ones used for PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. Now, this is for PlayStation 3 and the portable systems, the PSP and the PlayStation Vita. Those were Sony's three first platforms to go fully into the digital sales realm, where you could go online and buy games like you've been doing with iTunes and so many other platforms for over a decade. And Sony has announced that in July, 2 of those stores are going to shut down, and in August, the final one will shut down. Meaning, if you want to buy new software for those older platforms, you have until this summer to turn them on, connect them to the internet, and make legitimate purchases. After that point, those stores will no longer accept purchases. Now, Sony has said, oh, you can still check for downloads for things that you've paid for after that. But they're not really being clear as to why they would leave the downloading ability up, but the payment ability turned off. Whether that means they're switching a storefront, whether that means they just don't care anymore. It's very strange to us. I have a lot of feelings about game preservation, and I could just keep on going on a steamroll if you want to hear about that perspective.
Well, I mean, that was actually my next question, is just this idea that like books live forever, music, movies, all these other forms of entertainment and stuff seem to live forever. There's no limited time offer thing with these things. They were released and they exist. And I suppose the physical games themselves exist, but I don't know. It just feels different. It feels like from a game preservation perspective, we already have these difficulties cataloging these games that are so old that you just literally can't find them anymore unless you're willing to go the emulation route. But that seems like a workaround. What is your thought on that?
Well, Sony has an opportunity to keep these storefronts live because it assumedly is running on a back end they've already got operating, and because they're leaving those downloads live. Now, those downloads are almost certainly going to get shut down as well, because why would they kill one and not eventually kill the other? They want to be done with it. But we're in an era now where people look at their technology and go, this old stuff should run on the new stuff. Why can't I take my digital purchase and just have it work on another thing? It's not the same as, oh, the NES cartridge won't fit into the new Nintendo slot. You know, it's a whole different world where you look and go, I've got apps that I use forever. I've got Flappy Bird. I would like for that to work forever. Why doesn't it? And the answer is usually anti-consumer. And then we're leaving users going, oh, well, you know, if you're not going to let me legitimately buy games in the future on these old systems that I love, especially with PlayStation 3, because it's a weird architecture. So there's certain games that haven't been taken from PlayStation 3 and paid forward to newer PlayStations or what have you. Then it's like, oh, do I hack it? Do I jailbreak it? And then at that point, am I just entering the world of piracy because Sony didn't make it easy for me as a legitimate customer? I mean, this is the sort of story we cover at Ars Technica all the time. There's a online-only mode on the new Crash Bandicoot if you buy it on PC because they're so worried about piracy. That was cracked in one day by pirates. So if you pay for it, you have an inferior product than if you pirate it, which shouldn't be how this sort of stuff works. So it's this weird song and dance. And company by company, is it on a cultural level? Is it on a stockholder pressure level? What is it that drives these anti-consumer decisions? It's really unclear. I just think it's stupid that they would block that out so long as they've got a server running. I don't understand what infrastructurally is costing them money to let me go back and buy Calling All Cars on PlayStation 3, which is only on PlayStation 3 and is only digital. Like, that's going to be gone. And there are other people who probably still make $100 a month from their older games on these systems sold digitally. Yeah. It's not a ton of money, but for those small indie developers, that matters. So it's all hogwash as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like, take my money. Would you please take my money? I would love to give you my money if you happen to be able to offer this. Speaking of take my money, last thing real quick, and then we'll round this out. Kong versus Godzilla. It was a movie that I really did not care at all about. And then I read what you wrote about it, and I was like, oh, maybe I should care about this. Quick kind of take on your review of that film.
Okay, the last Godzilla film, King of the Monsters, came out in 2019, and my headline for that review was simply fart noises. That's all I said. That was the headline. That was the review. It was awful. I went into this expecting nothing good. Now, somebody over at the Warner Brothers / Monsterverse world read all the criticisms and took them to heart without turning this into, say, Citizen Kane or some fine cinema. Somebody understood how to split the difference between stupid and enjoyable, and they nailed it. Godzilla versus Kong is not in any way fine cinema. This probably won't be on the Criterion Collection in the near future. But as something that's out in theaters and on HBO Max right now, I would say if you can watch it on something that resembles a big screen with at least one or two other people safely, whether that's in a movie theater with an ironclad mask or with friends who are in your bubble, find a way to make it as theatrical and an experience as possible, because they nailed what needed to be fun, they nailed what needed to be funny, and they nailed spectacle enough to make this worth watching for 2 hours with that collective crowd thing. I watched it, and when I shouted holy curse word in response to various scenes that were stunning and all of the really cool tension that built up to each of these things, I wish there was a crowd around me laughing and groaning and cheering. This is as much as I've ever cared about CGI beasts. And I really liked Rampage, which was my previous lead for the modern kaiju / monster film title. But I would say this is above it. It's, again, not genius cinema, but a great watch with a group kind of film. I highly recommend it, and I cannot believe I'm saying that.
Well, it might not be too late for this to enter the Criterion Collection. Knox Harrington in the chat room points out that Armageddon and The Rock were both in the Criterion Collection, so you just never know.
Criterion's pretty good. Criterion's pretty good about getting action and finely made stuff in there. I'm just saying, there's a guy who at one point licks a screwdriver and then jabs it into a smart key lock and it unlocks it. You don't show the script writers tell you to just pay no mind to those plot holes, Poindexter. They're very much about it being stupid, but it's delightfully stupid.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much for hopping on today to ramble through a couple of your latest stories and what you guys are covering over at arstechnica.com. Sam Machkovech, always awesome. If people want to follow you online, where can they find you?
It's easiest to find me at SamRed on the Twitters, and find me there, samred.com, if you want to write me directly. If you want to have me open up the window here in Seattle and we'll figure out how to do some sort of local masked gaming, I'm down. I'm around. I'm easy to find. Jason, it's always a pleasure to come on. You all have a lovely rest of your show.
All right. Thank you so much, Sam. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. All right. So I told you earlier that there was going to be more kind of crypto-y stuff in the show, and that's coming up next. NFTs, which we talked about on the show before, but specifically how NFTs and artists are colliding. I'm really interested in this topic. That's up next. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by the Enterprise Tech 30. Now, the Enterprise Tech 30 is a piece of amazing research. It's developed by Wing Venture Capital in partnership with NASDAQ. The private enterprise tech, as you know, it's a very opaque sector. You have no idea which company is doing well, which one's doing poorly. It's very cagey around things like growth and revenue, can be anyways, especially as sales cycles can be long and arduous. There are many ranked lists that you can find that feature startups or tech disruptors out there, but these lists, they're often dominated by consumer brands or more mature B2B startups that everyone already knows. These lists create credibility and trust with a company featured that's going to deliver real tangible outcome, but this is often not the case. Many of these lists are produced with a lobbying or pay-to-play method. They're subject to bias based on how much hype a company can actually generate. Well, the Enterprise Tech 30 is different. It brings to light the enterprise startups who have the most potential to shift how enterprises operate for the better. Awardees to the ET30 are on a fast track of growth and to change how business is done. They're expected to be future IPOs, future million, billion, or multi-billion dollar exits. It is not possible to, lobby your way onto the ET30. In fact, you can only be selected and then become a part of an elite community that way. The Enterprise Tech 30 focuses on companies with potential at all stages of maturity rather than, only showcasing companies with mature businesses and undeniable traction. The ET30 should be considered a buying guide for enterprise executives who are seeking to bring more validated, more credible digital innovation into their organizations. Enterprise tech founders should also see inclusion as the highest endorsement of their current and future success. Founders that aspire to build publicly traded companies should see inclusion as a watershed moment in their founders' journey. And tech executives and high-performance operators will use the list to help guide their decisions on what companies to join. Whole lot of information, super dense. You got to check it out for yourself. The 2021 edition of the Enterprise Tech 30, brought to you by Wing Venture Capital and NASDAQ. It just launched, and you can check it out. Head over to enterprisetech30.com to see who made this year's list. That's enterprisetech30.com. And check it out. And we thank ET30, Wing, and NASDAQ for their support of Tech News Weekly and the Twit Network. All right. So NFTs, like I said, we've talked about NFTs on the show before. Non-fungible tokens would be the long way to say that. They continue to grab headlines. Artists are continuing to ask themselves, first of all, what is this? And second of all, do I get in now? Do I get in ever? Is it a good move as an artist to get involved with NFTs? And Abby Olheiser wrote a piece for the MIT Technology Review where she spoke with many artists who are dabbling in NFTs themselves to see what they think about this new frontier. And it caught my eye Great article, and I'm happy to have you on, Abby. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the artist, because that's really what your article focuses on. And in specifically, your article focuses on like digital artists, which is a lot of what we've been hearing as far as NFT and art is concerned. This digital art that's sold but not really sold online. Thank you, NFTs, for that confusion. Talk a little bit about the opportunities that the artists that you spoke with see in NFTs, and does that only apply to like artists that have a large following, or are newcomers recognizing value here? What do they have to say?
Yeah, so I think NFTs aren't unique as an opportunity for artists, in that the opportunity there is that you can get paid for the art that you create, right? But there's like a little bit more specific of something that's going on with NFTs in particular, which is that artists who have been successful at it have found that things that have been harder to sell on the internet for money that represents the amount of labor and the expense of creating that art have found that it maybe is an opportunity to earn actually a decent amount of money for that work. So a great example of that is animators, where animation takes a ton of time to create, right? And it takes expensive equipment to create it. And one artist I spoke to who does animation said that for her, NFTs provided an opportunity to actually get paid, an amount of money that she felt kind of reflected the amount of work that went into that piece. And, traditionally this has been a problem on the internet, right? Where YouTube animators have struggled for a really long time to figure out how to monetize their videos in a way that can keep up with the monetization that people who don't have to kind of painstakingly create this work can. This isn't benefiting everybody evenly, of course. One of the main arguments of my piece is that this is sort of recreating a lot of the problems that exist in kind of trying to be an artist online in new and different ways rather than solving all of them. But it is certainly, there are artists who are previously unknown who are finding a lot of success, along with artists who already have huge followings.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder if those who are having a lot of success right now are just kind of there's this recognition that NFTs, even though they've been around for a little while before suddenly, becoming the headline of a whole lot of articles and raising a lot more attention, that striking now while the iron is hot, it's like, well, it's in the public mindset right now that this is a thing that exists and there's some heat and energy behind it. We better get in there now and see what this, so that we don't miss out, fear of missing out. But what is are there any risks for artists who are jumping in on this quite so quickly right now?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first off, it costs money to mint a piece of an NFT, right? So you could easily make something and then you don't make the money back that you listed it for. I think also, there's a barrier here with the language that is used to talk about crypto in the first place, right? Where this is not something that is necessarily easy to understand or is a thing that people who are artists online are necessarily going to know about. And so it is very easy in a situation like this that people are going to get involved who don't know what they're doing and don't understand the risks and end up having a bad time or have their expectations that they've set for themselves not really be met in this space. So yes, of course there are risks. And I think it depends on who you are and how much you invest into it and what your expectations are in the first place.
Yeah. And then you also kind of touched a little bit on some scams that across the lines of the NFT circuit. Talk a little bit about what kind of scams you heard about.
Yeah, so it's a thing on the internet, right? So there are going to be scams that come along with it. The ones that I kind of focused on for my article have to do with stolen art, which again is not new for digital creators, right? So one artist I spoke to said that he's already really used to finding his art constantly being sold without his permission on like user created t-shirts and stuff like that. And NFTs have become another space where that is happening. So it's easy to create or ever, quote, mint an NFT without an artist's permission. You can also mint things that are associated with the art. So, for instance, I spoke to an artist whose work was minted on a place called Marble Cards, which mints URLs. And so, as you can see helpfully on the thing you've put up on the screen, she didn't give permission for those to be created and sold. And what's actually being sold is the URL that links to the work. However, the card that is created on the marketplace prominently features her work and her name with implied permission, right? So that's happening. Artists have found that they've been verified on platforms that they haven't actually signed up for. So there seems to be some kind of moderation issues there. And obviously, when something is sold without an artist's permission, these marketplaces are faced with the decision about whether to take it down or not, which generally they have been doing as artists have complained. When that happens, it seems right now, Motherboard actually had a really good article about it from the perspective of buyers. It seems that what's happening is the NFT that has been purchased is disappearing, right? So now someone's bought something that's not there. And I don't know what the kind of final conclusion of this is going to be because it's all moving so quickly, but because there's so much interest in this so quickly, we're getting into a situation where there are all of these kind of like unintended complications and scams that come with any attention economy or any place on the internet where content is being created and uploaded by users.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm an artist, but like a musician more than a visual artist, and so I have a curiosity about it. From the same perspective, it's like, okay, well, what is this thing? Is this is this a good way for distribution? What stops me is this this kind of fear around, well, what do I not know about what I'm doing here? If I was to put up a song as an NFT, what is the thing 5 years down the line I'd be kicking myself over for having done that? Have I given away something about that media that later I'd be like, oh, well, now I can't do that because I did that 5 years ago? And I don't know that there's a question necessarily in there, but I'm sure that there's a lot of artists looking at NFTs and considering the same thing, because when it comes to ownership, it's such a weird term to apply to NFTs because you don't really own anything. You own bragging rights, as you point out in your article.
Yeah, and it's really confusing because I think a lot of people who are really into NFTs talk about it in terms of ownership, but they don't mean that you own the piece of art. It's like ownership in like a fan sense where like it's like buying a rare trading card or a piece of merch or something that gives you a sense of like ownership over the thing you like, but you don't, like if I buy an NFT of an artwork, I don't own the rights to that art. I don't even necessarily own the art I don't necessarily host it somewhere, right? Like you're buying you're buying essentially metadata that is associated with that thing that you want.
Yeah, it's bragging rights and it's speculation on an increase in value somewhere down the line. If NFT interest and that this collective view that NFTs have value, or that art or that URL or whatever has value, it needs everybody to kind of buy in on that idea in order for it to maintain that value. And who the heck knows where that's going to be 5 years down the line? Depends on who you ask, I suppose. But then there's also the environmental cost. Did the artists that you spoke with, what did they say as far as how they were able to justify this in order to kind of play the NFT game or turn them away?
Yeah, so I would say that the environmental concerns here are one of the central parts of conversations that are happening among artists online who are talking about NFTs. So some artists I spoke to said that the environmental cost of kind of participating in this is insurmountable for them, right? So this is for them something that means that they will never do NFTs for the same reasons that they will never get into crypto in general. Other artists I spoke to who are more positive about it had essentially two responses, right? So one is that there are some artists who are buying carbon offsets to go alongside with the NFTs that they're minting. And then the other is that they feel it's unfair to single out the carbon footprint of blockchain versus all of the other things that we do in society that create pollution, right? So that is sort of like the way that people are thinking about it, where it's like, yes, this does have a cost, but so does printing a piece of art and shipping it halfway across the world.
Sure. Yeah. And I wonder, there's somebody much smarter than me can put together like a nice Excel spreadsheet that compares one thing to another thing, shipping art across the country. What is the carbon offset or the carbon footprint of that compared to, a single NFT? And I have to imagine there's some sort of imbalance. They're not quite, apples to apples when you compare them side by side.
I think one way, like one indicator that the environmental cost is not something just to kind of dismiss, right, is that Ethereum, the blockchain that hosts the vast amount of NFTs, it was sort of created for this, is thinking of switching to a new system that would significantly reduce its carbon footprint, right? So this isn't kind of like, I don't think anyone thinks that this is an imaginary issue, even if they feel that it's maybe overblown by people who don't like NFTs or don't like crypto. It is certainly something that is significant and, like I said, like a central part of conversations that are happening among artists. I would say almost even more than the potential for earning money.
Interesting. It's just such a fascinating topic to me right now. I feel like at certain points, in all of our lives, we can look at something that's emerging and new. I mean, we were here, however many years ago with Bitcoin, even when it was very, very early on with Bitcoin, looking at it and going, it's this weird thing. I don't understand it. Therefore, I'm not going to pay any attention to it. And then 10 years later, I mean, it depends on who you ask, but it's certainly more of a thing now than it was then, and it's made a lot of people rich, and it's done all sorts, posed a lot of interesting questions about finance and decentralization and all this stuff. So it's easy to look at NFT right now, and yeah, I think everybody's just kind of curious, like, are we at that point with this thing, or is it going to be a flash in the pan? Who the heck knows? All I know is that I read your article, and I really appreciated that you wrote it. So Abby Olheiser writes for MIT Technology Review. That's technologyreview.com. Abby, thank you so much for hopping on. If people want to find you, follow you and your work online, where can they find you?
Yeah, I tweet occasionally at Abby Olheiser, which you can see my name right at the bottom, or technologyreview.com.
Awesome. Thanks again, Abby. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, take care. All right, up next, a Nest Hub that tracks your sleep. All right, what we really need is technology that watches us sleep every single night. Maybe watches is actually the wrong word when we're talking about the technology that's inside the Google Nest Hub Generation 2. But Ryan Whitwam reviewed this device for Android Police, and Ryan is here to share his thoughts on it. Welcome back to the show, Ryan.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So you, lucky guy, got to have this device in your room watching you sleep every single night. I realize I keep saying watching, but that's not actually true because there's no camera on this device, right? How is it doing this?
So it uses Soli, which is the same radar technology that Google used in the Pixel 4 to do the motion sense gestures that, kind of didn't, work super well. It works better on the Hub. The sleep sensing is really accurate. It's as accurate as any wearable sleep monitoring device that I've used. And it's nice that you don't have to worry about charging something or wearing it at night. I'm very uncomfortable with things on my wrist while I'm sleeping. So I was kind of excited theoretically for this device. Google says that it's going to give you all these insights into your sleep and it's going to help you do, X, Y, and Z better. And I've only been using it for about a week and a half. I haven't seen any suggestions that really lead me to believe that this is going to change the way I sleep. But it is accurate. And from a technical standpoint, that's impressive. It's doing this with radar. And it's not constructing an image with the radar. Right. It has a spectrograph, and it just uses machine learning to crunch the numbers and figure out what it means. So it can tell when you are in bed, when you fall asleep. It can track your breathing. It uses the microphones on the Hub to listen for snoring and coughing. So that kind of stuff could be useful to people who have breathing issues at night. But Google seems to want that they want to charge for this. They're very uncertain about how they're doing it. They wouldn't tell us exactly what they have in mind. But for the rest of the year, at least, it is free. And after that, it might be part of some sort of paid subscription. or just a standalone subscription. I don't know. I mean, the device itself is $99, and I feel like a $99, slightly better smart display than the last hub that also can track your sleep. I mean, that's not bad for $100. But if then you want me to pay monthly on top of that for the sleep tracking, I don't think that it is unique enough that I would want to do that.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the concerns that I've had on this is, it seems like, and maybe this is an I don't know, like an unreal expectation, but we've all gotten very used to a lot of services like this being free, especially from companies like Google that can afford the overhead and, they're fine to shoulder the cost of it. Doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. I think I just kind of found it a little interesting that they decided, no, this thing will be a fee-based monitoring system. Meanwhile, we have phones that we could do this with and not pay the fee. I mean, like what is a cost that you think would be fair for a service? Like, I don't know, is that $2 a month, $3 a month? I'm not even quite sure.
So Google just finished their Fitbit acquisition. And Fitbit has a premium health service, so I wouldn't be surprised if this was bundled in with that at some point. I don't recall off the top of my head how much that is. I feel like it's maybe, I don't know, like probably $5 or $10 a month. But I think probably you wouldn't be able to find many people who would tell you that, because I bet nobody's using it.
Yeah, looks like $9.99 per month for Fitbit Premium.
Yeah, that seems like a lot unless you're really into fitness. Maybe, right. I don't know. Maybe if you add sleep tracking to that, more people would buy it. But I don't think that's super useful to me. I also have problems with the hub because I have dogs, and it turns out it can't tell the difference between a person and a dog. I mean, which makes sense when you think about how the device works. It doesn't see anything. It doesn't know what a person looks like. It's just looking for something that is roughly the size of a human, or at least part of a human, and breathes. It's the breathing apparently that triggers the presence sensing.
So your dog Egon, you mention and show pictures of your dog in the article, and your body double, in other words, your dog.
Yeah, right.
So what was the impact that Egon had on your results? Was it just like you were sleeping at 3 p.m., which you actually weren't?
He gets in bed like before I do, and then when I get up, he'll like hop up in the bed for a little while longer. So I actually have a screenshot in the review if you go forward a little bit there. So it thinks that I was in bed for like 13 hours and that I slept for 10 hours because at both ends there's the dog just slept for like an hour in the bed, and it just logged that as me. Unfortunately, there's no way to say like, no, most of this was me, but this part wasn't. So you can delete the whole day. That's all you can really do. So that's kind of a bummer. I mean, I don't want to like shoo the dogs away from my bed. But I also found that the other one that is in that picture, he also triggers the sleep sensing. He's a little bit smaller, but still, apparently large enough.
Yeah, like maybe if there was a way to, I like how you're digitally petting the dog there, John. Good move. If there was a way to set kind of like off hours, like don't worry about anything that ends up in the bed in the afternoon, because like I'm just not a napper, so that's not going to be sleep, whatever you think it possibly is. For the real data, hungry people who want to quantify themselves to that degree, that might actually be an important caveat, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you just want like a lot of personal data, like you just love digging into your own stats, then this device could be super fun to play with. And I mean, for $100, it's a better version of the hub that Google already sold. I mean, it has more microphones. It's a little bit faster. It's not it's not lag free. The display is still not super fun to use for a long period of time, but I can tap things, and I'm pretty confident that it will recognize that I've tapped them. Whereas with the old display, it was kind of like, did it see that? Should I tap this again? There's less of that with the new one. So I mean, I think even just for that, it's worth getting. And the MSRP it's $50 lower than the last one. I think in reality, it probably is going to be maybe $10 more if you go and buy it at retail right now, just because the old one went down so much in price after release. But right. I think this one will get cheaper too. And I mean, I'm sure there will be promotions. There will be like 2 for 2 packs that cost less. And you would actually need 2 of them if you sleep in a bed with another person and you both want to track your sleep. It's only able to follow a single individual. It's just like a little radar bubble that extends a couple of feet from the display. So, you would, yeah, you know, a 2-pack actually seems like a really good idea. I'm surprised Google doesn't already have that.
Yeah, and then link them together for stereo speakers. Even though you mentioned the speakers on the device aren't the best in the world, but it's that's kind of like not the major focus of the device.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean it's basically a Nest Mini inside it, but you know it faces backwards, so it's not great for listening to music, but it's fine for like assistant or if you want to play a tune every now and then. It's fine.
Now, so you slept with the Nest Hub at the side of your bed for the length, the duration of your review process. Did you happen to learn anything about your sleep that you didn't know before?
I mean, it tells me that my sleep schedule is inconsistent, which I knew, and I know that is not ideal. I mean, that's really the only recommendation it's given me so far. I'm still using it. I'm gonna keep using it, indefinitely probably. And we're going to update our review periodically with, additional thoughts. So we'll see if it gets smarter and tells me things that I didn't already know, things that go beyond common sense.
Yeah, right. Well, and Google had even mentioned like it takes, I can't remember what aspect of the analysis process this is tied to, but it takes a couple of weeks for it to get enough data for it to do something.
So originally they said it would take 2 weeks to start offering recommendations, but I think they changed their mind about that at some point because other documents I saw during the review process said only 1 week, and that is when I started seeing suggestions. Maybe they'll get a lot better when I hit 2 weeks, which I will do soon, maybe in a couple of days. I would not say, buy this if you want sleep tracking.
Right.
With the uncertainty, with how Google's going to monetize it, I don't think you should get embedded in that ecosystem until we know. And you can get a super cheap fitness band or whatever that'll track your sleep if that's all you really want.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I will say, just from a personal perspective, on the Soli radar, like I was happy, like we all knew that this was going to happen, that the Soli that was in the Pixel 4. That, I mean, I don't know how useful the Soli really was for me in the Pixel 4. Primarily, I appreciated that it was there for the face, for kind of the face scanning aspect, for making that a little bit faster, and knowing when I'm reaching for my phone in a dark room so it lights up the screen. Any of the music controls and that sort of functionality, never used it. Any of the times that I did, it was very unpredictable. But do you have that kind of control with this device now that Soli is here? Is Soli dedicated entirely to sleep tracking?
So it does have some of the motion sense stuff. I tried to nail Google down on why it doesn't do as many things as the Pixel 4, because on the Pixel 4 you could go back and forth, in tracks by swiping. It doesn't do that. You've got you've got two gestures. You've got hold up your hand to play pause, and you've got wave to snooze an alarm or a timer. So it doesn't know like left from right with the waves. It's just, you throw your hand up there and it's able to understand that, like, you've got your hand moving around in front of it. That's really as precise as it gets. And Google said that they wanted to do what they knew would be a good experience, which I think is kind of a roundabout way of saying that, like, the sensor isn't, accurate enough to really do all of those gestures they were trying to do with the Pixel 4, well. Because I think my experience with the Pixel 4 is pretty similar to yours, that it worked just enough to be kind of cool, but not enough that I would ever, rely on it.
Really lean into it. Yeah, that's really disappointing, actually, to hear that about the Nest Hub. I would have assumed that bringing a Soli radar into a Nest device, and especially that one, like, that's not a tiny device. There's, I mean, I realize I didn't design this piece of hardware, so I don't actually know this, but I imagine that there's enough room inside with that size of device to have, let's say, a larger radar. And maybe that's what allows for you to mount it on the side of the bed and have it analyze your sleep. But when I saw the Soli on the Pixel, that immediately came to mind. Like these like track skip gestures and everything would be great on an assistant device, on a home a voice assistant device. That makes a lot of sense. Like in the kitchen, I'm cooking. Sometimes I don't want to speak to the thing. I just want to wave my hand and have it skip to the next track and be done with it. I hope that they add that. I don't know that will be in their plans. I don't know that they've announced that it will be, but that seems like a big missed opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like I mean, it seems like something they could probably work out. I mean, it uses the waving for the snooze, like I said, and that's actually super good. It works really well for that, actually too well. I feel like I snooze more than I probably should, because it's like I just throw my arm up there and it's like, all right, it's quiet. I can go back to sleep. But I mean, they could just they could recognize different gestures. Like if you're playing media and you're waving at the thing, you probably are trying to change tracks.
Yes.
So that seems like something that would be easy to implement if it's physically possible with that sensor. And I mean, and I don't know. I'm not, same deal. I didn't design this thing. I'm not the engineer who put it together. So they would know better than I would if that's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ryan, always appreciate your perspective on things and appreciate you taking time to talk with me about the Nest Hub Gen 2 review that you have up on AndroidPolice.com. Right now, everybody should go and check it out and see if the Nest Hub 2 is for you. Ryan, thanks for hopping on. Where can people follow you online if they want to find you?
You can go to my Twitter, which is just my name, @Ryan Whitwam. Good luck spelling that. But you will get lots of pictures of dogs and keyboards if you follow me on Twitter.
Yes, indeed. I can attest to that. Keep it coming. Thank you, Ryan. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Take care. And that is it for this episode of Tech News Weekly. See, I told you we had some great interviews lined up. Although, Micah, I did miss you today. I hope that we'll see you next Thursday. Next Thursday is when we have our next episode of Tech News Weekly. Twit.tv/TNW is where you can go to subscribe in audio and video formats. Jump out to YouTube, subscribe there. We don't care, just as long as you subscribe, because then you won't miss a single episode or a single interview. You can find me on Twitter. I'm @Jason Howell. I do other shows on the network, all about Android, of course. Last week I did a hands-on tech review comparison of the OnePlus 8 Pro and the OnePlus 9 Pro. I've got some stuff working out for hands-on tech here in a couple of weeks that you're not going to want to miss. So yeah, just twit.tv. You'll see my face pop up. Actually, next week I'm going to be on This Week in Google, and Security Now Leo is out. So you get a little extra Jason on a few of the other shows. Big thanks to John Ashley at the studio, and also Burke for helping out behind the scenes to make this show as good as it can be so that you can watch it each and every week. We'll see you next time on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
Hope you enjoyed that episode. If you would like to laugh while learning about how to take control and take advantage of all of the features that your iOS devices provide, then you should check out iOS Today. The show Rosemary Orchard, my co-host, and I, Micah Sargent, host every week on the Twit Network. It's all things Apple all the time.